Yo, yo, yo. Happy Thursday. Thursday, episode 27. Go Fund Yourself. JD Gagnon here with a good friend of mine, Lucas Kozinski. We've been friends forever, but also one of the co-founders of a platform we know and love well, Moonwell. Welcome, my friend. How you doing?
Awesome. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. We're just here to spread the love, share some insights on what's happening and hopefully dispel some FUD. So today on the episode, we're talking a little bit, of course, how can we not, about the SEC. There's a whole heck of a lot of FUD coming out of the SEC, or at least surrounding what's coming out of the SEC. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about DeFi TVLs rising and what that means potentially for the space in the next little bit, and maybe what's leading to some of those DeFi TVLs increasing. We're going to talk about Bitcoin, of course. How can we forget? Balaji did a really interesting video the other day. So if people haven't looked at it, go check that out. And lastly, we're going to talk about the internal struggles with regulation in the US. And something that, of course, for all of us that are builders or participants in the space, this is coming to a head. So in 1 second, we will get rolling. But first, we have to play our little video. Where is our little video? This is what happens when oh, here we go. All right. Oh man, this is what happens when Kiara's not here. She keeps everything going and working properly. I can't even find the damn video. Anyways, welcome back. So first, we're going to start talking about some FUD on the SEC. So a lot of stuff in the last 24 hours that have come out of the SEC. Obviously, I think the Coinbase Wells notice was a big one. TRX being, apparently assigned security status. Justin Sun and a whole bunch of other people are being charged by the SEC. We've got, the Coinbase situation is obviously top of mind. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Lucas?
Yeah, so I reached out to you yesterday to figure out what we're going to talk about, and very quickly after the Fed meeting with Jay Powell, everything just started just coming out, right? So. Yeah, where do you want to start?
It almost feels like cover, right? Like, okay, so obviously we have a systemic banking problem, like clearly in the US and globally. And if you listen to the Balaji video, the one I'm referring to, you can search it. It's on YouTube. Maybe we'll put a link to it in the comments or something. But if you watch the Balaji video, I mean, they've known the banking system was on the verge of failure since 2021. And there's internal memos that have been leaked and different things. And so obviously this is like a huge problem. We've talked about this lots on the show, but I mean, then all of a sudden you've got the Fed who's trying to combat interest rates and inflation and all of this kind of convergence of shit all happening at the same time. And I mean, raising an extra quarter of a point yesterday obviously is not ideal for the banking system, puts a lot of pressure on the banking system, and almost immediately after it felt like it was cover, right? So let's talk about the Coinbase thing. So at least for me, I think that Coinbase and Brian in particular taking a stand is admirable because someone has to, and there's only a few entities globally that have the pockets deep enough to actually try to see this through with the SEC and to try to figure out, okay, at the very least, what are some boundaries? What do you think is going to come of this? Do you think the SEC is actually going to succeed with Coinbase, or is it just a lot more kind of FUD and speculation?
Yeah, I think it's still really early, and it's going to be hard to kind of figure out how this goes. We had a good call with Tamika Tillman yesterday from Han Ventures, who's the chief legal officer there. He had been on the Hill. And one of the things that he pointed out to that I wasn't as aware was that essentially what's happened over the last couple of years on the Hill is all the good people all the really smart people that understand crypto and are very forward crypto thinking have actually left politics and gone over to industry. So there's this gap right now on the Hill where you have Warren's, and Warren's name just keeps coming up everywhere, where they're just pushing, the space and politics in a certain direction. But I think the most important thing, like I was thinking about, like what we can do. And I just hope that our generation really like just starts standing up for themselves, and we get the right people actually representing us in office. And the other thing that I think a lot of us have been really shy to do is actually talk to elected officials. So I've always been really worried and tried to figure out how to engage in a lot of this stuff. And you see things like, Coinbase working with the SEC and the CFTC and everybody else and getting well notices. But the one thing we can be doing, each of us, is actually talking to senators, right? And building relationships with them. And they're looking for that. I just don't think enough of the community, the crypto community and the builders are doing that, myself included, right? So
yeah, and I think there's some really good lobby organizations. I mean, Blockchain Association, which we're a part of, GBA, Global DCA. Like there's a few of these different kind of lobby and advocacy groups that we're a part of and that are doing great work. But I think again, it's David versus Goliath a little bit. You've got some of these advocacy groups, but they don't have the deepest pockets. It's expensive enough for memberships for the people that are members. But anyways, I think I was talking about this a few days ago. One of the interesting things with respect to actually what you just said is speaking to the policymakers, because that's actually where we're going to see the change. That's actually where we're going to see the policies and the guidelines become clear, is via lawmakers. That's it. Like that, the SEC is given their mandate and is given the rules and is given the policies from legislation. And then they have to figure out how to interpret that and apply it, to industry.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, right now, all they're doing is they're saying, well, I don't know, square peg, round hole, and just trying to put it together and trying to piece things together. And we can kick and scream all we want, but until there's clarity around these policies, we're not going to see anything. And we're going to talk a little bit about this in a few minutes, I think, with respect to Senator Warren in particular. But I mean, we've had a few members of Congress that have been fairly vocal. Loomis Gillibrand, obviously, are notable. There was today, I think, actually, there was a bill proposed this morning. I'm not sure if it's actually been proposed yet, but let me see here what it was. Tom Emmer introduced a bipartisan bill today, effectively trying to outline many of the specifics around crypto and maybe how we can start to build a regulatory framework. So, I mean, there are people in Congress and in the Senate that are trying, but I couldn't agree with you more, man. Everybody needs to get involved a little bit, start contributing. We've written, when the White House had the executive order or whatever, that all the different groups had to do a report on crypto. We provided briefs on that to Treasury, I think, and the Fed. The more that we as a space get involved, I think the better. Here's a question for you. Does this make you a single issue voter?
I hate talking about politics, to be honest with you, because they're never so simple.
Yeah.
But the hard part here, I try to be as bipartisan as possible. Yeah. But the problem here is that a lot of the pressure that we're actually seeing is coming from the Democratic side. Yeah. There seems to be more appetite on the Republican side, and that's not my words. Those are words of people that I trust and are actually more on the Democratic side. I think this is just part of the cycle. You and I were talking right before the show, like, what is all this stuff like? And I think it's marketing. I think it's personal gain. whether it's our friend Gary or Elizabeth Warren, and getting into the next election cycle that we're going to see here in the next 2 years. And yeah, there's definitely some meat, on the bone and stuff like that, but it doesn't make sense. And when things don't make sense to me, I try to look outside, and I think it's a lot of personal gain. So I think it's a cycle that the space has to go through, just like we're going through the bear cycle. We were talking about, our boy Do Kwon getting arrested, and Justin Sun and all that. And we need to clean out the space, right? With all these bad actors that are actually very vocal. They do a really good job marketing and trying to, FUD people and get them to buy their shit coins. And I think it's just a cycle. It's a maturity curve that we need to go through. And I know how you feel about the stuff. We talk about it all the time, but I am, the more my wife tells me that, like, hey, like, you sure you want to be in this space? The more I know I'm doing the right stuff, and we just got to keep pushing.
Keep pushing through. Yeah.
Keep pushing. Keep building.
We've talked a lot, Kiara and I in particular, about what we call the crypto arms race. And effectively what we're referring to there is that, there's a bit of a race to see who's going to be favorable and open to and supportive of blockchain technology and all it can offer to society globally. Is the US losing? Are we losing?
I definitely think we're losing. It's all the conversations that you and I have with our friends and other builders. It's people are going to get forced out of the US if this continues, from a banking perspective, from a building perspective, resources. The amount of time that we spend now on like legal stuff and like making sure we're doing things the right way is just taking us away from being able to build. I was talking to a new fund out of the UAE that is setting up. I don't want to drop names, you know who I'm talking about. And they were saying that when they talked to council in UAE about raising a fund, they just literally told them, go raise the money. Like, you don't have to worry about disclaimers. Like, and that's an environment that crypto thrives. We move pretty fast, and a lot of this stuff is slowing us down. Yeah, the US, at the end of the day, all the users of crypto in the US are going to lose out in the short term because they're going to be not allowed to participate, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, not just from a user perspective, but I mean, builders, like, that's obviously a significant portion of the tax base comes from entities and corporations. And right now, everybody's offshoring stuff, and we have all these incredibly complex legal structures that, I mean, we barely understand. Obviously, we have multiple law firms that we're paying exorbitant amounts of money to try to navigate this stuff. And I mean, so it's kind of like a pendulum, right? Like, sometimes we'll talk about Do Kwon in a second because I think this is funny, but it's a bit of a pendulum. Like, so we went from like no regulation, no oversight, which is what allowed all of this nonsense to happen, which is what allowed the Three Arrows, the Terra Lunas, even FTX, unfortunately, of the world to come to this point, is the fact that everybody was just kind of turning a blind eye for the longest time, with the exception of Ripple. Somehow Ripple got stuck in this securities battle, for a couple of years now, it feels like. But now the pendulum, like, all of this stuff happens. I completely agree with you. We need to flush this shit out of the space for us to move forward and for us to get meaningful credibility and to bring on more retail participants and more institutional participants. But I mean, right now we're kind of just flopping around with the early adopters and the innovators. And the pendulum has swung a little too far in the US, and we're on the verge, I think, of pushing a lot of people away. Like, I moved into the US recently, and part of me is thinking,
that's because
holy crap.
Calgary.
Yeah, because it's so bloody cold there. But I mean, I think the US, if they want to maintain some sort of leadership globally from a financial perspective, which we talked a little bit about yesterday with the CBDC and the yuan now settling Russian and Chinese trade deals, as well as trade deals between Russia, China, and the Middle East and many parts of Africa, they're using the yuan instead of the US dollar. So, I mean, the US is already losing its dominance in terms of economic power. I mean, this is arguably one of the next largest financial infrastructure evolutions that we've ever seen. And here's the US kicking and screaming, playing politics.
JD, at the same time, this is the first time this has happened, right? And if you look at politics in the US and how slow policy actually moves to do even like basic things that we talk about, right? That's just how the system's designed, right? Like you need a lot of people to come together and agree on stuff to actually move it. And the US has not like led. I can't imagine, like, I can't remember in my lifetime. Luke talks about this all the time. 5G wasn't in the US. Chips and manufacturing wasn't in the US, right? So the US tends to move a lot slower and be very vague. They're a fast follower when it comes to policy and like new things. So a lot of this is creating a ton of noise, but it's more of the same that that's just the history of the US and how the government and, the House and the Senate and the executive branch have been set up. It's meant to move really, I don't want to drop that F word, but really, really slow. And it's just part of it. It's just we're in the middle of it now and it sucks.
Yeah.
They'll come around to it.
We talked a little bit about this before the show, but I mean, at the end of the day, like this is the natural progression of emerging markets, of emerging technologies. There's going to be under regulation, a whole bunch of stuff that we go, oh shit, we need some regulation. Then there's going to be like this weird period, which we're in right now, which is like, okay, but what does regulation look like? Like, how do we actually do this? Is it just securities laws, period? Is it, derivatives and CFTC jurisdiction, or is it maybe something separate?
You and I talk about this quite a bit, right? With some of your ideas and things on the security side. I think it's going to be a hybrid. I personally don't think you could take the existing financial structure that we have and force crypto into it, including securities law. I think a perfect example is KYC and KYB. I was talking to a buddy last night who is not in the crypto space, but TradFi guy, extremely smart. And like the one thing that really excites me about Base and Base launching an L2 and how that's very different with having a publicly traded US company, Coinbase, actually spinning off a team to launch a product like Base, an L2, and everything that it opens up that hasn't been able to be done before. And what I'm talking about is, and this hasn't gained much traction, but there are conversations internally talking about verified by Coinbase, right? And what they mean is they have 110 million users that they spend a shit ton of money KYC and KYB in, being compliant, that the government actually and regulators trust to do a good job. And they're going to be able to provide a layer of KYC via ZK or Merkle rollups where it's like a wristband, right? Like you go to a concert and if you have a wristband, because they ID you at the front door, you're able to buy drinks. If you don't, you can't, instead of showing your ID every place you go, right? So it's the same concept that I think we're going to see more and more central players, whether it's Coinbase, a Kraken, a Gemini, maybe even the US government, have a centralized KYC, KYB and say, well, if you comply to this stuff, then all the DeFi projects and the whole ecosystem could actually still thrive without having to do KYC, KYB. Yeah. That excites me because even, I was watching your show the other day and the whole Euler exploit and everything else. If everybody's KYC'd and KYB'd, but you still have the same free market dynamics that we've created in DeFi, well, even hackers, like, who they are, like a lot of those problems go away. At the end of the day, the government just cares about like 2 or 3 things: taxing people, OFAC sanctions, like being able to cut people out of the ecosystem, and
protecting consumers against fraud, and
yeah,
that's about it. Yeah. Let's just make sure that we can keep a bit of a pulse on this stuff. I know we can probably spend all day talking about this, but a little bit of good news, kind of in the wake of this, and this is sort of what we expected a little bit, I think, coming out of the banking crisis, if we want to call it that, if we're even coming out of it. I don't think we are, but DeFi has seen some interesting increase in TVLs, and we're starting to get kind of back into that positive momentum swing. What are you seeing? Are you seeing a lot of a lot more interest now in the Polkadot ecosystem, and now with this base and your guys' partnership? We'll talk about that in a minute too. But are you seeing a little bit more kind of interest from people again to start participating?
We're still seeing liquidity kind of flow back into Ethereum. The other L1s or L0s, whether it's Polkadot or even Avalanche and Solana, I still think we're seeing what started last summer. I still think we're in this cycle where a lot of large players have de-risked. They don't trust bridges as much. They don't want to take the risk of going into newer ecosystems, and I still think that liquidity is still flowing back into Ethereum, and it's going to in the near future. That's part of the reason we are excited about an opportunity to be able to launch on Base. We'll see what the Moonwell community decides here in the next couple months, but yeah, I still think it's a tough environment, even with incentives or rewards and grants. It's hard to get liquidity into a Polkadot ecosystem where we're big builders, and the Benki team and Avalanche. You see Box. There's positive stuff going on, but it's still hard, right? I think the TVL and everything that you're seeing prices rebound. LPs are still very, very hesitant, and they pull the liquidity out very quick. When everything started going down with USDC, you just saw liquidity just go up overnight, right? They don't want to take those risks. They don't know what the contagion and what the counterparty risk looks like. So yeah, I think it's just a normal cycle that we're in. It might be a little bit longer this time around. I do want to talk to you about the banking stuff, though, and the banks blowing up, because I listened to Jay Powell a lot yesterday, just going through and just listening to his words. I'm not an expert. I love macro, but there was a couple things that he said, and then I sent you a video of my buddy George Goncalves, who's head of fixed income, and I think it was on MSNBC last Friday. And there's a theme that's being missed here that nobody is talking about the banks. I think, my personal opinion, take it for whatever it is, but literally I'll quote what Jay Powell said yesterday. I think they do want some banks to go under. Absolutely. And here's the thing, it's credit tightening, right? So with banks going under and higher standards for lending and credit tightening, what does that do? It actually squeezes liquidity. You have layoffs, and inflation comes down. And Jay Powell literally, if I could find a quote here on my screen, what did he say? He said, "The impact to banks will result in tighter credit markets for households and businesses, and then weigh on demand, labor market, and inflation. Such a tightening in principle works as a rate hike." So nobody is talking about this, but I think they're systematically trying to put enough pressure to actually tame this inflation by having some banks blow up, and they are going to step in. And Yellen was on the Hill yesterday as well. They're gonna backstop these deposits, which seems weird, but they're trying to really tame inflation. They're worried about inflation.
Well, and rightly so, because inflation, I mean, I'm not an economist, of course, and everything we say on this
Sure.
This show, yeah. Well, everything we say on the show is just our opinion, and it's definitely not financial advice, of course. But I mean, inflation is a lot worse than even what's been reported. I mean, if like energy prices, as an example, household energy prices have gone up at double the rate of inflation over the last 24 months. Now we can, Putin war this and supply chain that, COVID, whatever. But at the end of the day, inflation is not transitory. It's fairly significant. They do need to do something to curb it. Increasing interest rates at too fast of a clip is going to wreak havoc on the economy. The problem with this banking squeeze, and I tend to agree with you, I think it is almost a strategic move on their part to allow some of these banks to fail. The problem is the people holding the bags are the shareholders of these institutions that end up, in many cases, for no fault of their own, although as a shareholder, you should be aware of what the institution that you're an owner of is doing. But having said that, there is a lot of capital that's going to be eroded out of the economy. So I guess it's, in a sense, it's a wealth transfer. It's a wealth transfer from the people that they don't want to have the money to the people that they do want to have the money.
Well, but JD, since like 2009, the wealth transfer has been to those shareholders, and
it's just reversing now. Yeah,
like think about over the last 13 years, 14 years, right? Since 2009, how many banks or corporations have actually gone under? Like, no, they were feeding them, right? So now I think they're trying to overcompensate on the other side, and they're like, oh shit, it's actually good when non-high functioning companies do go under. The fact that they're forcing them and they're trying to force these market dynamics on banks, that's where I have an issue as well. But
but in the U.S. has always been all about, proper market dynamics. And I mean, if we would have let the market dynamics happen, well, at least that's what they say. If we would have let the most of these banks would have been gone a decade ago. Like the whole system is somewhat broken, but now we've essentially nationalized it. Like we've essentially nationalized banking. It's up to the federal government to determine now, because almost every community bank is insolvent based on, not every, but Balaji in his statistics,
duration, right?
The duration risk, yeah. So like they're not insolvent in the long run, but if there is a run on deposits, they're screwed. Yeah. But they're not backing a lot of these smaller banks. Like there is an arbitrary line that is too big to fail and small.
So that is the issue. When was it? Last Thursday, Yellen was I think she was on the Hill by I don't know what committee. And she was like, well, they're not too big to fail. And they're like, do you realize that by saying that and by doing that, it's going to cause them to fail, and you're going to make the big banks even bigger because all the deposits are flowing in. So you see all this funny stuff where like JP Morgan and these big banks, they're getting all these deposits and then they're lending it back out to the local banks, right? To the regional banks. And it's like, wait, seriously? And they're like, it's kind of crazy. But again, I think that at least listening to Jay Powell's words, I think they're worried about inflation, right? Most people, when you talk about inflation, I didn't even realize this, right? You're at a new base. So like in 22, if inflation grew at 8%, and this year it's growing only at 6%, well, you went from 100 to 108, and now you're at 108 and you're growing at 6%. It's not like it's slowing down. It's just growing slower from the existing base, right? It's an issue everywhere you go. Like, I mean, you have kids, you know how it is.
It's crazy.
It's especially, Denver, we're still not that bad. But when I was down in Miami, we went out to dinner, and it's like, wait, what? Dinner for 4 people? Like, this is nuts.
$400 easy, right?
I mean, a poke bowl is $20 now. Just some raw tuna with rice.
with rice and a little bit of salad. So, anyways, we're almost running up on time. We have a couple more topics I'd like to touch on quickly, but so we're gonna have to run through them quickly. I'll just get your thoughts on this. obviously there's a lot of speculation, obviously, thanks to Balaji, about Bitcoin and what's going on. Based on everything you've said, based on the credit tightening, based on the banking challenges, inflation, uncertainty globally, what do you think is going to happen with Bitcoin?
I think we're going to keep seeing some of the action that we've seen. The way I think about it is it's a flight to safety, and anything that is remotely centralized, do you really want to be in it? Like, you saw what happened with USDC and they had exposure to banks, but I thought through it on that Friday when USDC was starting to depeg, like, what should I be doing with my money? Again, not financial advice, but I was like, oh shit, I think people are just going to go into BTC because that is the only true decentralized crypto. You have price exposure, but at least you know what that exposure is, where everything else, you don't know what your counterparty risk is. So
that's exactly.
It's going to go down. It's going to go sideways. It goes all over the place. But I think the narrative around BTC and it being the only true decentralized with no counterparty risk is shining right now. And we're seeing that with the price action.
I don't know if it's going to go to 1 million, but we'll see. Arthur's saying the same shit. Arthur Hayes saying maybe not in the next 90 days, but he's pretty sure that this cycle it's going to go to $1 million. Now, if listening to Arthur, he's one of the smartest guys I know, and we've met personally a few times and so on. But nonetheless, for some reason, when he puts out articles, it's almost like do the opposite of what his article says, because it's almost always right, but at the wrong time. Like whatever he says.
Right? Like, timing is so hard. But we were talking about it. It's all marketing. The fact that we're talking about Jay Powell, the Fed, Arthur Hayes.
Balaji. Like, how many people knew who Balaji was until like 10 minutes?
It's just really good marketing. And I applaud them for that because I'm not very good at it. So
just like McAfee saying he was going to eat his own dick or something if it didn't get to.
I think that was you, but
well, I said it too, but no one cares when I say it. Just I'm no McAfee, although he's dead now and I'm still here, so we're doing okay. All right, BTC obviously has been on a bit of a tear. There was a huge green candle today.
On ETH as well. ETH is right when it just.
I don't know why. I don't know what caused it. But anyways, exciting stuff to watch. Okay.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, no, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. So this is a shout out to my friends at Arrow. I have been talking about ArrowSwag for the last 2 years. I don't own a piece of ArrowSwag. We even had Patrick on the pod not that long ago. And here's Lucas repping his ArrowSwag, almost to rub it in my face. Well, there it is.
Not to rub it in your face. I wanted to start a new trend. Whoever the last speaker is, the next speaker should be wearing their swag. So I just happen to have Arrow here.
There you go. So shout out to Arrow Markets, good friends of ours. I actually won. They had a contest in Denver, where at one of their events, Arrow, where you got these little cards and you had to calculate the return from your options if the options.
I thought you were going to say you ate your own, but
no, I ate. I ate a lot of cookies that day. It was very good. It was fun. But anyways, so I won $500. Shout out to Arrow for hooking us up with 500. Maybe I gotta buy Arrow swag. Maybe that's the answer. I'm just gonna take their logo and go make my own damn swag. Also, quick shout out to Cypher. I love this Cypher. This little guy on the Cypher logo. Huge fan. Anyways, stole the swag at ETH Denver. So thank you, Cypher. Any final thoughts? What's coming up for Moonwell?
Yeah, there's our first ever community call that I'll be hosting next Friday. I want everybody to join and hear about some of the exciting stuff that we've been working on. We're going to have a guest, Vector DAO. It's pretty exciting what they've been working on. They're a contributor to Moonwell. So I say, come and join us next Friday and you're going to learn a lot more. And I look forward to it, and thanks for having me. And hopefully, I'll see you in Miami here soon.
Without a doubt. Where can they check you out?
Yeah,
Moonwell on
Moonwell, Moonwell.fi, or on Twitter, it's Moonwell DeFi. And like JD said, lending and borrowing on Polkadot, and hopefully soon on Base. We'll see what the community decides.
I'm biased, but I'll give you a shameless plug. If I had to bet on a borrow lend platform still being around and thriving in 5 years from now, I would put a lot of my chips in your guys' corner between you and Luke and the rest of the team.
I appreciate it.
If we're going to see success, Moonwell's the place to go. So check them out. Lucas, thanks so much for your time, man. Appreciate it. I wish we had more time. Anybody that's watching, like, subscribe, smash the bell, do whatever that shit is. So hopefully we can bust some FUD and share the love and bring some positivity and momentum back to the space. Lucas, go FUD yourself. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, JD.